Okay, we're recording. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special segment of the second annual Global Climate Restoration Forum. We're here with Clara and Lina, who are both working on climate restoration at the local government level. Before we dive in, let's hear from them specifically. So Clara, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Erica. My name's Tara Sreekrishnan. I work for the County of Santa Clara here in the heart of Silicon Valley in California. And I serve as Chief of Staff to a County Supervisor. We have 5 elected members on our Board of Supervisors. And I work for Supervisor Dave Cortese and staff him on sustainability issues. He has really been a pioneer of many bold climate actions throughout his term on the board. And recently we've been able to partner with the foundation on a first of its kind historic climate restoration emergency resolution, which passed last year. And in many ways, the county has set a framework for what local governments can do to support climate restoration. I'm really excited to speak with Lina and yourself. And I know that me and the supervisor, we really value our partnership with the foundation.
Thank you. We really value its partnership too. Supervisor Cortese and you, Tara, have been really amazing partners, stepping up in a lot of ways. Lina, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Lina Liakou. I'm the Managing Director for the Global Resilient Cities Network for Europe and the Middle East. I oversee our relationship with the 21 cities within the region. Global Resilient Cities Network is a global city network comprised of almost 97 cities across regions, across the world. And we've been supporting these cities for the last 6 years in operationalizing urban resilience on the ground and how they can strengthen their urban systems, whether these are the physical, the economic, the social, the government systems. Prior to joining the Global Resilient Cities Network, I was the Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Thessaloniki in Greece. So I also worked on issues around resilience and sustainability and strategy development from the perspective of local authority.
Perfect, thank you. We're so happy to have made the introduction with the Global Resilient Cities Network, so we're happy to be working with you. Lina, can you tell us a little bit about how local governments are stepping up and paving the way towards climate restoration and maybe moving faster than national level governments?
Sure, and I think we've seen the important role of local governments for the last more than 10 years. And, you know, they are paving the way. And in many cases, national governments follow them, or even, you know, the cities are dragging, you know, the national government kind of ambitions. But I think at this point, especially during the COVID period, we've seen even more ambition from the cities. We've seen cities such as Milan, Rotterdam, Paris, New York, Mexico City. We've seen cities that actually accelerating their climate actions because they also see that this is an opportunity to respond to the impacts of COVID and to ensure that they actually build a livable and lovable, as a friend of mine says, city. So we've seen cities that pedestrianize their urban centers, giving more space to cycling and walking and invest in green parks, things that both address social distancing and ensuring the safety of the communities, while at the same time actually moving the needle forward in terms of climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And we've seen how many cities are actually putting very higher targets than their national governments. We've seen how supranational entities such as the European Commission, for example, is is leaning towards the cities and trying to learn from them and trying to raise their ambition accordingly. So I think at this point, there is a momentum specifically as part of the green recovery conversation to actually try to push the ambition. And climate restoration, I think, is the bar that we should go towards.
That's really inspiring. Thank you. So speaking of pushing the ambition, Tara, you mentioned that Supervisor Cortese introduced and passed the climate emergency resolution at the county level just last year. Can you tell us a little bit more about how Santa Clara County is setting the framework for climate restoration at the local government level?
Yeah, and the push to pass the resolution involved dozens of local climate groups along with the foundation. And what we're really thankful for is the movement here in the county is part of a quickly growing number of similar initiatives throughout the world. And in terms of climate restoration, Dave spearheaded transitioning our county to 100% clean electric power. He's also currently pushing the county towards all electric buildings and more electric vehicle infrastructure during the new construction process. And he was on our agricultural preservation task force. So they developed the county's ag plan, which is a comprehensive strategy that includes carbon farming, improving soil quality while sequestering carbon. And the county's also embarked on a state-funded grant to meet our climate goals by pulling carbon out of our atmosphere. So there's quite a few climate restoration policies the county's championing.
That's so exciting and really wonderful to hear about. So you both mentioned a lot of interconnected climate-related components. We all know climate restoration is a pretty new idea compared to mitigation, adaptation, resilience. And these concepts don't exist in a vacuum. They really depend on one another in order to succeed. So Lina, can you speak a little bit to the importance of combining resilience with climate restoration and the interdependence between the two ideas?
Of course, and if we want to transition to a more green living, we need to do it through a holistic approach. So we see how many disruptions we have in our daily lives. We've seen it in our cities, right? We have drought, we have earthquakes, we have social unrest, we have protests, we have health pandemics. So unless we are able to ensure and strengthen the resilience of our systems, of all our systems, and at the same time put the vision into our strategy and into our day-to-day operation, and these are like visions towards not only climate neutrality, but actually restoring our climate, restoring our natural ecosystem. So unless we work on both, let's say, elements, we won't be able to reach any of our goals. So again, this is why it's not just, oh, I'm working on climate restoration. Oh, I'm working on mitigation. Oh, I'm working on resilience. So, you cannot see that as different kind of trends that cities just pick, but it's actually a combination of things, of policies, of strategies, of ways of working, of methods, of targets that the city needs to take into consideration as it kind of defines where it wants to go and how it will be able to reach its target. And nothing can happen unless it is actually built through a consensus from its citizens and its communities. So again, it's not just a political leader that says we will become the best, but it's actually the political will with the operation of the city authority and the grassroots and the stakeholders and the businesses around the local authority, that all together need to have this common vision of where they want to go, and also an understanding of how they're going to go and how they can ensure that they are able to go there.
That's a really great point about needing to have consensus from the citizens. And that brings to mind what Tara mentioned about the buy-in from the environmental organizations in Santa Clara County. Tara, can you speak a little bit to how that looked with the Climate Restoration Emergency Resolution getting consensus from citizens?
Yeah, and as Lina mentioned, we had even a launch with the foundation earlier this year to really emphasize the importance of climate restoration alongside mitigation and adaptation. And in terms of the resolution, before we brought it to the board, the supervisor did speak with as many environmental groups as possible to get their buy-in and get their support. So when it finally did come to the board, there was really a consensus in our local environmental community. And I think it was just starting an important part of that conversation about climate restoration, which isn't talked about as much. So that's why we felt it was really important to have a launch with the foundation and with the local environmental community alongside us.
Yeah, definitely. You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot is how do we message climate restoration or climate action in a way that inspires that buy-in. And I think, you know, making an intentional effort to do a launch and, you know, publicize the work that the county is doing is really critical. But I'm wondering, Lina, if you can speak on a larger scale to how do you see local governments, you know, around the world using their communications to really connect with the citizenry and with the local environmental organizations and get everyone on the same page?
Yes, and it's not easy. It's not so much to connect with the environmental organizations because you usually share the same narrative and the same kind of discourse. The difficult thing is how you reach out to the everyday citizen that actually doesn't have any specific, let's say, climate sensitivities, or they don't understand, you know, and that's the critical issue. They don't understand what's their role in this or what is in for them. So I think this is an important element, is the local authority needs to be able to articulate what are the benefits, not only for the future generations, which we all know are important, but actually now for the family, for the specific inhabitant of the city. So how will their life will be, how their life will improve because of what is happening? Why should the city invest their tax money into this kind of projects? This is why in resilience, we use a lot the concept of multiple benefits. And again, it is how you select these investments, select these actions that actually are able to create benefits for the many. And for the many now, as for the many of the future generations, especially this period where social cohesion has been impacted because of COVID, where local economies have heavily been hit by the pandemic. It is very important that local authorities prioritize these kind of investments that support the most vulnerable, while at the same time move the needle forward in terms of their ambition. And again, we've seen, and I think, I don't know, COVID, I mean, it has been a horrible experience, I think, for all of us, but at the same time, it has created an understanding within local governments around the importance of them. And around, you know, how actually a mayor, a city council, an agency can impact the daily lives of these of the citizens and the communities, and how they can safe-proof them. So you see a more, let's say, seriousness in how they prioritize their project, how prioritize the investment, and adding this, what we call the resilience dividend, into this kind of actions.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there are so many pieces to pull together and different stakeholders to unite in movements like this. And it's great to hear some of the ways that people are doing that. So, you know, of course, once you've gotten the stakeholders on the same page and resilient or climate restoration movements are moving forward, then the next question is, how do you actually implement them? How do you operationalize climate restoration or climate resilience at the local government level? So Tara, can you start us out talking a little bit about how Santa Clara County is working on that?
Yeah, and just to Lina's point, in our county we have a population of 2 million people, and we're dealing with the record-setting historic wildfires in California, and the second largest wildfire in the state's history impacted our county and burned through hundreds of thousands of acres. So we're witnessing some of the real world observations of climate change negatively impacting our natural resources industry, safety, human health. So that's really galvanized a lot of people behind the initiatives the county's taking. In terms of operationalizing policy initiatives, so, you know, Dave's job is to bring the policy to the board. He's a legislator, and our job as his staff is to work with our sustainability staff at the county. We have an Office of Sustainability to ensure, for instance, the climate restoration resolution. And that policy is now built into our sustainability master plan, which is updated yearly. And it's also to ensure that the targets we set forward, for instance, Dave's initiative to transition the county to 100% clean energy, to make sure that those targets are met. So that goal was actually met last year, thankfully. So I would say that in terms of operationalizing, it's working with the legislators. It's the legislators' job to put the policy forward, and then it's staff's role to really implement that. And our staff here at the county could not be doing more of an amazing job doing that.
Thanks, Tara. That message of, you know, interdisciplinarity or inter-office collaboration is something that we hear over and over again. You know, the climate challenge is so huge. There's no way that one county office or city office or legislator can tackle any of this on their own. And so it's great to hear how Santa Clara County is doing that.
Yeah, and you know, we have our Office of Sustainability, the Ag Plan. We worked with our planning department. So every department in our county, which has over 20,000 employees, they tackle everything with the environmental framework. So every legislative policy we put forward in any issue area, we have to note the environmental impact. So for every policy we put forward, we have to know how it impacts our environment. So the county has really made that a priority.
That's great. And Lina, do you have anything to add about how this kind of operationalization happens globally with cities around the world?
Sure, and this is something that we've been focusing on for quite many years, because you know, it's easy, let's say, to say and to declare that, you know, you want to be resilient, or you want to move towards climate restoration or climate neutrality and so on. But the big question is, how are you going to be able to do that? So we've been working with our member cities for quite a while. And one of the ways that we've been working with them is trying to support them in creating these positions and these offices and these hubs within their local structure that will be the main point of contact, will have the mandate to work on, for example, issues on resilience. And we're talking about local authorities that in a lot of cases don't even have climate offices. They have urban planning offices, and these are the ones, or they have green space or tree planting, offices. So being able to work within the local authority, understand the context, the political dynamics, the bureaucracy behind that, and trying usually with the mayor, with the city leader, to find the right structure within the city that will pick this kind of new approach, because in most cases, or back in 2015, resilience was very new, or completely unknown in many cases for cities, trying to create this new structure. It also takes a while for this to get embedded into the local authority, to get recognized from the other agencies, and try then to create the different processes and policies of collaboration. So this takes time, but this is the only way if you actually want to ensure continuity, especially when you have, political changes, because that's the biggest risk here. Resilience, climate restoration, these are generational changes. These are generational transitions. This doesn't happen overnight, which means that the city needs to work on these things and have a continuity. So being able to embed and to disrupt the system and create the necessary kind of structures, processes, policies is fundamental. And so far we have 87 cities that have institutionalized formally these resilience offices. And in many cases we have, let's say, the fifth CRO, the fifth Chief Resilience Officer that comes into this position. Because, people change and so on. But this is a position that kind of has been institutionalized and embedded. And it kind of is like, of course we have a CRO. Why not? It is that easy and that simple after so many years.
Yeah, it's funny. We hear so much about really big, bold climate commitments, and we hear nothing about the building of institutional processes to allow them to be sustainable. And like you say, there's no way to make these things happen without putting these things into effect, these systems into effect. But it's interesting that our focus is always really on the splashy commitments and not on the building of systems. It's just not sexy yet, but so critical. So that brings me to my last question for both of you, which is, we've been talking about leading up to now, how have these policies, these commitments been happening at the local government level? So my next question is, what's next? So Tara, do you want to start us off with what's next for Santa Clara County?
Yeah, that's a really amazing question. I think that with shelter in place, that's really gotten folks to think more about their personal environmental impact. Even Dave, he would go to regional meetings. He serves on the Association of Bay Area Governments and our MTC and regional transit commissions. And, he would drive for an hour or longer to have a meeting about regional transit and housing policy. And now they're having those just as effectively over Zoom, just like this. And I think in everyone's individual's lives, it's really gotten them to think about their environmental impact, and how if we really make a collective commitment among community members, we can tackle not just this global health pandemic, but also our global climate crisis. So it shows you that we just need the political will to take those types of drastic actions. In terms of what the county is doing, so Dave is, he is termed out of his position at the county at the end of this year, but many of the policies he's put in place will see the impact years from now through our sustainability master plan. And so I know that his staff will be looking at how those policies really materialize over the years, especially building electrification, more innovative transportation models that he's introduced on our Valley Transit Authority, which passed a similar resolution, and also our Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan. Those took years to develop, and we'll still see the results years from now. In terms of Dave's work, it looks like he could be serving on a state level. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but a lot of the policies that he's been working on at the county, I think there's a good possibility he'll get to bring those statewide.
Congratulations to Supervisor Cortese and to you for leaving behind such a great legacy at the county level, and good luck with the state race. Lina, over to you. What's next?
So the collective priorities of our network are focused on the one hand into strengthening resilience into the recovery efforts. And this has been a major piece of work for a lot of our cities, and trying to include a lot of the work that the cities have done on resilience into their recovery plans, into the recovery action plans that they send to their national governments. And the second element is specifically equity and green recovery. We see the importance of embedding social equity into the green ambitions of the cities, and trying to support those cities in how they prioritize their investments through this kind of multi-benefit approach, in order to be able to make the case both inside the city council, but also make the case to their citizens, to their communities.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to join me today. And this was a really interesting conversation. I think that our community will appreciate the insight into the impact of local government on these initiatives. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.